Hey everyone, in the previous episode we took a look at ASP.NET Core middleware and dependency injection, also known or referred to as DI, and we took steps to implement our own middleware and took a look at how services get injected into the middleware. In today's episode we're going to take a look at ASP.NET Core MVC basics, right? So MVC stands for Model View Controller, and let's jump in. So first things first, I'm going to comment this out, and what I will do is in my endpoints I'm going to type in map default, and this will allow me to select the option of map default controller route. What I will also do is I will disable this middleware, otherwise it will give me errors. And what this will allow us to do is to essentially, instead of writing out these code blocks for every route that we want to select, we're going to opt in into the model view controller pattern, where the controller is going to be responsible for the routes and dealing out the information, which will essentially be models. And then we're going to be displaying the view, which is the view part of MVC. Okay, so remember that instead of having a code block for every single route, we will now have a class called a controller, all right, where we will define these routes. And we're just going to take a look at this now. So let's go ahead into our voting system.ui, and we will create a new folder called controllers, and this is by convention. You need a controllers folder, and in here we will create a home controller.cs, and make sure that your controllers are appended with controller. Okay, so your controllers need to have controller in their name. This is how, when I talked about middleware, how it knows how to inject which service into which class into the constructor, into the function. It knows that through reflection. And the way it discovers your controllers is again through the reflection by scanning for a controller prefix, and also if it inherits from a controller class. Alright, so go ahead and inherit from controller, and you will have to import Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. And if we just F12 on the controller, we'll see loads of things in here. It also inherits from a bunch of interfaces. We can look at the controller base. It also has a bunch of stuff in here, right? Loads of functionality. So you essentially opt in into loads of functionality by inheriting from controller, and by adding the controller postfix, you allow your application to discover that controller and register it as part of the middleware. Now, to do the registration of part of the middleware, the discovery, and all the injection stuff, we need to add a service. So we go to services and we add controllers, okay? And you can play around with it, disable it, run the application, and you will see an error similar to when we disabled the registration of the service here and still tried to inject it. You will see a similar kind of error. So let's uncomment this. We know that we're going to need this to essentially have the controllers work correctly. And in here, we'll do something really simple. We will create a public string index, right? So we're creating a function within a class where we're going to return hello index. And I'll call this page for now. Okay, so the convention that the map default controller route has is the controller name and then the action name, right? So this is the controller name, or rather let's refer to this as the controller class, and then each individual function that's exposed for access, usually prefixed with HTTP get or post, and we'll go into this attributes in a second. These are actions, right? Or each individual action. So let's go ahead and run this and see this page, or rather the bit of text that it's going to return. Okay, so here we see hello index page, and you can see that we're on the root route. So root route is essentially the part where you have a no route like this, just a slash, right? And we're still getting the action within the home controller. So if we go to home index, we're still going to get this, and the reason we see the same page on these two routes is just purely by convention. Home/index is registered as the root route as well. So if we go to something like home/about, we're going to get a 404 because the action for that route doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and make it, right? So we're going to make a second action. You can't have functions that are the same name. You can have different signatures, so something like this. is perfectly fine, right? So C# rules still apply here. So let's go ahead and rename it to about, and we will say that this is an about page. We'll remove hello. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Alright, so now if we try to go to /about, you will see this more prominent difference between home/index being able to be reached from the root and the about isn't. We can, however, reach it through going to home and /about. So, right, first we have the controller name and then we have the action name. And, whoa, let's try again. About, there we go. We reached the about page. So, controller name, action name, same as we have here, controller name, action name, and remember that these things are overridable, okay? So what you can do is you can specify an HTTP GET or an HTTP POST. So this is more on the HTTP specification, how HTTP works. So you have a GET, POST, PUT, and this usually in the REST API conventions specify which HTTP methods you're gonna make. So if I bring up Postman, you can see if I try to make a request, I can do all these different methods, right? Right now they don't matter, and usually as you go through building web service servers and learning, you will get familiar with these automatically, same as CSS, right? So for now, we will do HTTP GET, and in here we will say, we can supply a string, and we can say something like about -page, right? So what this will do, now, let's run this, is it will override the original convention. So when we go to home about, it's no longer there. So we'll have to remove the home page and say about -page, because now when we say this here, we ignore the original route definition supplied by this middleware, okay? Because we just say, right, it's just the about -page now. Okay, so be careful when you put these here. And it also depends on if you want to pass parameters here. But we'll get to that once we're building this up. So if you don't want to lose the original convention, you can supply the base route here. And you can say home. So let's run this. And in here we'll say home about -page. Okay. And now we can preserve this convention. Right. So what if we basically say we have the base route, but we want to override it anyway? Well, all we do then is we just supply a slash, and we basically say, right, from the root and on, it will be this route now. So again, let's go here, and let's go to about -page, and you can see that it's working. Okay, so that's enough playing around with routes, or actually, we can also say that the convention is for the base route to be controller, and for the action is then to be action, right? So this is how you redefine the base notation. And the reason you do this is, again, we can actually go into this slightly, but again, the way you get used to this is by practice. So you need to go ahead, build your own web service, and play around with passing different parameters, and learn your specific use cases, because there's a lot of ways that this can work. So now we can go to home/about, and the page is displayed again, right? Just because we supplied in square brackets controller and action, now it will try to look for home and about and map those to the route. Okay, and let's just quickly say that we want to supply a string word, and let's say /word, so it's going to be part of the route. And here we're going to run this again. And let's actually put a breakpoint on line 24 here. Okay, so I'm going to go to /home, /about, /hello. And here I will see that the word is populated with the hello variable because it's part of this route convention now, right? So I specified a pattern, it fits the pattern, and that's the parameter there. Now, if we would have said that we just want this, right? So HTTP GET word and the route controller, imagine if we didn't have this. This is the reason that you might want to specify this. So if we run this, we'll see that essentially any route that we will provide here will try to be matched against this. So you can see this is the first one, and we get the favicon even, but we hit the hello index page, right? And if we try to hit the about page, guess what? We're hitting the about page, but it's the word that's about, right? Oh, I pressed refresh there. I wanted to go through here. So let's say something like about, or rather hello world, and we can still see that we're hitting the about page and the word is hello world. We pass this, and again, because the page is being refreshed, we hit the favicon. So be careful with how you build your routes, because in your network tab, if we refresh and we pass through this twice, you will have other requests going in automatically, like looking for your JavaScript, etc. You might, if you mess up your route definition, you might just end up sending multiple requests to an action for your JavaScript files, etc. Right, so be careful when you define your routes, and usually you want to specify a base route convention, and be careful, don't set it to a slash route. So when you put a slash at the beginning, you essentially define it from the beginning, so you override the base route. So now that we know that, I'm gonna leave the controller here. I'm gonna do I want to delete the action? Yeah, let's delete all the actions, and kind of we'll take a step back. Actually, let's take a look at the actions, and what I will do is I'll bring back us to the point that this middleware, instead of defining multiples of these code blocks to just say this is the data that we want to return, we're gonna say, right, we're gonna have controllers with actions, and based on the route there, we're gonna have a convention in terms of names and stuff like that to then know what data we want to return. And this will essentially then write this to the response like this, but automatically, all right? But we still have access to the response object here, and we can grab the body and write async here manually as well, right? So that's still an option, but that's for more advanced cases when you know what you're doing. If you're a beginner, stick with just following what we're doing here. Okay, so let's remove all this stuff. I want to make this video a little bit shorter than 30 minutes, so I don't want. We're not going to implement everything. We're going to take a simple service of the voting poll factory. So let's go ahead and grab the voting poll factory and the iVoting poll factory interface. And one thing I noticed is the voting poll factory doesn't actually inherit from the iVoting poll interface. iVoting poll factory interface, right? So let's go ahead and just make sure that it inherits from it, so we can then register it in our startup. So for our services, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our services and we're gonna add a singleton. And the reason I can add a singleton is because there is no global state here. All right, so let's go ahead in our startup. The type that I want to register is the, let's say, voting poll factory. I want to register a voting poll factory. And for this, I will need to bring in the namespace. I won't be able to find it here. So I will need to go into my dependencies, add reference, and I will for now just grab voting system. And let's press OK here. So I got the voting poll factory. One thing is I might not want to be injecting the voting poll factory into my constructor here. So if I create a constructor, it's not ideal to be injecting your voting poll factory. You also want to include the interface. So when you add the singleton, make sure you bring in the interface here. So now instead of injecting the voting poll factory, what you will be injecting is the iVoting poll factory interface and hiding away the implementation. So the reason for this is that later on, let's say we replace the voting poll factory with voting mega poll factory, but it will still be inheriting from the iVoting poll interface. All we have to do is replace the name here, and the rest of our program still works as expected. Okay, so it's one place that we have to change it in, and not go into every single controller and change the voting poll factory to voting mega poll factory. Okay, let's go ahead and inject our voting poll, and let's actually name it poll factory. Let's initialize this field, and we get this poll factory. Awesome. Let's also make a public voting poll factory. I just want to take a look at what it returns. So it returns a voting poll. I'm going to grab this type, and just like any other function, I'm just going to return it from my interface. And I'm going to call this create, right? And what I want to do is I want to return poll factory dot create, and whatever it creates, I want to return that. So for the voting poll, I will need to grab voting system.models. Okay, and this function will accept voting poll factory request. Now, we can just go ahead, grab the voting poll factory request, and this is a thing that we are going to be passing as a parameter to here. And let's just call this request, and we'll pass it here. Okay, so this compiles, therefore it works. Now there is a concept you need to be aware of, and it's called model binding. So what model binding is part of the MVC framework. So this is the controller part, and that's the C in MVC. There's also the M, which stands for model, and this is the model. This is the user data model. This is how a user would think of a thing that is needed to create a voting poll, right? So if you are a user and you're like, right, I would like to create a voting poll, I need a title, a description, and some names for the things I can vote, right? And then everything should be taken care of. So this is the model. This is the mental model of what the user thinks of, he needs or she needs to create a voting poll. So this is the thing that we are going to bind to when we send a request. And one thing I will do here is I will do an HTTP post, and let's go ahead and make sure first that we can hit this route. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using Postman. Okay, and I highly recommend that you get this tool as well. I'll leave a link in the description. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, I'm going to open up Postman again. So here I have Postman. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this URL and I'm going to put it in the URL here. And I'm going to change my method to post. So this is what I'm going to be doing. Let's go ahead and just press send. And what we're going to do is get a 404 status code right here. Okay, so we're hitting something that's not there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the convention that we have defined. We have defined home and create. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to hit home/create. We'll send, and we get a 404 as well. Now this may seem a little bit weird. However, this is what happens with a REST API convention. So usually what you would have with a RESTful API is you would have a route that goes /voting poll. If you do a get on voting poll, you would get all the voting polls. If you do /voting poll/ID, you would get a specific voting poll. If you do /voting poll and then you post to that request, you are creating a voting poll. If you do a put, you're updating, right? So it's a RESTful service. So right now, when we specified an HTTP post, it doesn't matter what this is called. It's going to be acting as part of the RESTful service. Okay, so at this point, we don't have the view part. We have a RESTful service. So we only have the model and the controller part. The view part isn't existing. The view part at the moment is Postman. So to hit this create part, we just have to remove the create here, and we are hitting home. Okay, if that didn't make sense, go ahead and read on RESTful APIs. It's just a convention that you re-implement, and it's very effective. It's just so people understand how APIs work and can sort of have a pattern between how we build things. Okay, so we take a look at the request, and it is all null. Okay, so that's good. So when we post stuff to a controller, we'll get our exception, blah, blah, blah. Nice. We want to post stuff as part of the body, right? So we can go ahead and post XWW form URL encoded. So let's go ahead and post that. What do we need? We need name. So, or is it title? Let me take a look at the request. It's title. So let's say title equals hello. And for now, this will do, right? So we're just testing. We just want to see how this works. So let's go ahead and send this. And let's inspect request again, and we can see that we get the title here, and it says hello. But this is not the only way model binding works. We can also specify different places it can try to extract the model binding parts from. So you have the from attribute, from body, from form, from header, from query, from route, from services, right? From services is dependency injection, so we don't look at that right now. It's about the top 5. So at the moment, we are doing a body of XWW form URL encoded. So this is essentially same as saying from form. Okay, we can also do this from query. So let's go ahead and check this out. We'll continue here. We'll let this throw. And instead of specifying the title here, we'll say question title, and we'll say hello. Let's say send. And now if we look at the request, we still see hello here, okay? And we throw this, that's fine. And that would be the equivalent of specifying a from query. Okay, so we write a query and we specify from query. And the reason you might want to specify these is you saw how it got it from first from the form, and then it got it from the query. So you might only want to get it from one way or another. You don't want both, and that's the kind of thing that you might want to opt into. So let's go ahead and remove this. I'll remove this as well, and let's go ahead and send this, and we'll take a look at the request. It's all null. Good. So just making sure that it's still working as expected. Another thing is we can try to send a raw JSON. So let's go ahead and try to write some JSON, and we'll say title is hello, and let's send this, and let's see if it works. So if we go into the request, it will all be null, right? For now. If we go ahead and stop the server, we can go ahead and specify from body here and run this again. So getting it from the body this way and getting it from the form are two different things, even though in the Postman they're under the same section body. So let's go ahead and send this, and we'll take a look at the request, and we can see that hello is here. So this part was all about understanding the from attribute, right? So and the post. So it's about how the model binding works. It depends on what part of the request it's sent in the body, as a form, as a query. How do we want to bind it? From query, from form, or from body, right? Or from route. From route is basically when you see me specify the convention here, like let's say hello and request.title or something like that, or title here, right? So it will try to bind this title to this request, but I'm not going to run that. Let's remove this. We are essentially able to send a request here, and for the body, I will opt in for XWW form encoded. Let's go ahead and just make sure that it works, right? Let's go ahead and create a title with hello. We'll make a description that says hello world poll, and names we will do 1, 2, 3. So simple, right? Let's go ahead and post this. Take a look at the request. We will see a bunch of things in the names. We will see one string that essentially says 1, 2, 3 as part of the names, and you will see that it will fail, right? So what went wrong there? We have the names, but this is essentially one string. So if you imagine me putting quotes around this, right? That's wrong. That's one string. So if we want to supply multiple things, would be the same as defining an array. Okay? So as part of the form, let's go ahead and define 3 different things. And this will be key to understanding when we start building forms as well on the view side. So 1, 2, 3. Let's go ahead and send this. And now if we take a look at the request, we will see that we have 3 names now. Awesome. F5. Let's see what we get back. And you can see that the response is some JSON, where the title we have as the title, and then we have created the 4 counters, right? So it's working. So to round up this episode, what we essentially did is injected our own service, gone over how controllers and action work. We injected our service into the constructor and then used the request as a parameter in the action, and gone over how model bindings in ASP.NET Core work to essentially find what data you post in your body form or in your body raw representation in your query or your route, and how specific you can be with binding that to your model. And you can also write your custom model binding, but that's a very advanced topic and you usually don't need to go there. Essentially, we mount our data to our model, which is part of the M of the MVC, and inside the controller is how we invoke the functionality that we wrote before. So this is a good practice where essentially your business logic lives outside the controller. And if you think back to the previous episode, that's where I explain how the last orange middleware, this one, will call into your business logic. And just think of this class as being surfaced in your middleware and then calling into this functionality here, right? Hopefully this makes sense. This will be it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode.